Welcome to my Windwalker Monk guide for the War Within. Let's jump right in and address the obvious. This is a long video. Why? Well, because I wanted to create a comprehensive guide with sections that you can refer back to throughout the expansion. We'll be covering Windwalker Monk not only for Season 1, but as a complete class overview, exploring how to truly maximize its potential and refine your play. But first, a little about me. I've been playing Windwalker Monk since Warlords of Draenor, where I first grew attached to the spec, but it wasn't until Dragonflight that I started pushing myself to master it. With 3 cutting-edge achievements and a current all-star rank of 18 for Windwalker Monks in Mythic Nurabar Palace, I hope my experience gives you confidence in this guide as a reliable resource for all things Windwalker. Whether you're new to Windwalker, someone just considering the class, or a long-time player looking to reach a new level, this guide is for you. My goal is to help you unlock the full potential of Windwalker Monk, so let's dive in and take your play to the next level. Now, since this is a longer video, let's kick things off with an overview of what we'll cover. Don't worry, each section and chapter is timestamped in the video description, so you can easily jump to any part you're interested in. I've divided this guide into 4 main sections. Windwalker, the fundamentals. We'll start with the essentials, looking at the playstyle, talent choices, and everything foundational to getting most out of the Windwalker Monk. Season 1 of the War Within. In this section we'll cover the essentials for Season 1, including stat priorities, best in slot gear, tier sets, and consumables. Pretty much everything you need to gear up for all content in the current season. Third, we'll have a look at the Shado-Pan hero talent. Here, we'll dive into the Shado-Pan talent, breaking down how it works in both single target and AoE situations. And finally, but definitely not least, Conduit of the Celestials talent. We'll cover the alternate hero talent, Conduit of the Celestials, looking at its uses in both single target and AoE formats, kinda similar to how the Shado-Pan section plays out. With this overview in mind, let's get started with our first section. Windwalker, the fundamentals. In this section, I want to highlight 4 essential concepts for getting the most out of playing a Windwalker Monk. These ideas are especially important for understanding the Shado-Pan and Conduit sections later on, so it's best to start with the first key concept right away: priority. When you hear the word rotation, I want you to replace that term with priority. Unlike some other classes, Windwalker Monks do not follow a strict, unchanging rotation. Let me clarify what this means. A rotation is more of a traditional approach in Warcraft, where you execute a set list of abilities in the same sequence repeatedly, with no real variation. Once you reach the end of your rotation, you simply start over. However, Windwalker Monks do not work like this. We use a priority system, where certain abilities have higher importance than others and should be used in a specific descending order, depending on availability. For example, Rising Sun Kick has a higher priority than Blackout Kick in both single target and AoE situations, without any exceptions. This means, if both abilities are off cooldown, Rising Sun Kick should always be used before Blackout Kick. This approach allows for flexibility and adaptability, ensuring you're always using the most optimal ability available in any given moment. But we'll dive deeper into this priority concept when we actually get to discussing hero talents and their specific priority lists. The second key concept to understand is mastery. This is what makes Windwalker Monk unique. Our mastery increases the damage of your next ability if it's different from the one you just cast. This means you should avoid casting the same ability twice in a row to maximize your damage output. A helpful way to visualize this is by looking at the hit combo talent. This is a talent that we run in all situations, and it rewards us with an additional 5% damage increase when we consistently alternate abilities and maintain our mastery. Repeating the same ability consecutively, known as breaking mastery, will cause a noticeable loss in damage, especially if done repeatedly. Here's an example to illustrate this point. Let's say you cast Tiger Palm to generate Chi, but you find you're still short on Chi to use Fists of Fury. Rather than casting Tiger Palm again, which would break mastery, use any other ability that procs mastery before casting Tiger Palm. Another example of this could be in a situation where you cast Tiger Palm and get parried by a boss, like I do here on Brew Twister Oven Axe. In this case, we need to adjust. In this situation, even though I wanted to cast Rising Sun Kick into Whirling Dragon Punch, I still need another Tiger Palm to generate the chi to do so. So I cast Crackling Jade Lightning first to avoid breaking mastery, and then follow this up with a Tiger Palm, allowing me to cast the abilities I want to. The idea here is to weave abilities in between each other as you work through your priority list, always keeping mastery in mind. To wrap up this topic, I've prepared a list of all Windwalker abilities that proc mastery and can be used between two casts of the same ability. Remember, any ability not on this list will not proc mastery, so keep that in mind. The third important concept to go over is the Monk talent tree. This is the left talent tree on your talent page, and it's the same for all Monk specializations. In this section, I'll start off by showing you the cookie cutter talents you should take for almost every scenario. I won't be discussing each talent in detail here to keep the video focused, but I'll highlight some key talents you should be aware of. I would highly advise that you take the time to go over all of your talents to understand what you're actually using. I guarantee you'll discover abilities in our toolkit that you weren't fully aware of. Additionally, I will be going over the defensive abilities and talents, but I've separated that into a whole chapter on its own coming up. For now, I'll cover Ring of Peace, Fatal Touch, Chi Wave, and Tiger's Lust. Ring of Peace is an underrated but incredibly powerful talent. Not only does it function as an interrupt, but it's also highly effective in dungeons for giving your tank and group a breather. For instance, I think this clip from the Liquid Antarak kill is one of the best examples of the full potential of Ring of Peace. They utilise the ability to prevent adds from reaching the boss, which would have caused a wipe. By using Ring of Peace, the adds were kept at bay in the perfect position, allowing Liquid to maintain uptime on the boss while dealing damage to the adds. Fatal Touch gives you a 5% damage boost every time you use Touch of Death on a target, lasting for 30 seconds. This talent is excellent for both dungeons and raids, as you can use Touch of Death early in a fight to increase the damage output of all your other abilities. Don't think of Touch of Death as just a finisher, consider it as a way to amplify your damage, especially when you can align it with other cooldowns. Here is an example where I have Touch of Death available to use, but instead of instantly using it, I hold it so that it'll line up with my biggest cooldowns to optimize my damage output. Chi Wave appears here due to its choice node of Chi Burst. Currently, Chi Wave is the stronger option, so you'll want to choose it consistently. While it's a small passive heal that you don't particularly have to think about, it's generally more beneficial than Chi Burst currently. Finally, Tiger's Lust. It's an incredibly versatile talent you'll want to make use of in all situations. It provides a 70% movement speed boost and acts as a freedom effect, removing roots and snares. But the best part? It can be cast on any friendly target. There are countless scenarios where I save players by Tiger's Lusting them during a boss mechanic or mythic dungeon. This talent is invaluable, and if you aren't already using it actively, now's the time to start. Here is an example where I used Tiger's Lust on a Death Knight tank on the Rashanan boss encounter. Death Knights are notoriously immobile, so giving them this extra speed allowed him to always get to the next position when the boss moved. These talents, while just a few highlighted from the Cookie Cutter Monk talent tree, are incredibly impactful for maximizing both your damage and your utility. Now that we've covered the Cookie Cutter talents, let's dive into optional and situational talents. There are 11 talents available in this section, and outside of the Cookie Cutters, we can select an additional 5. Out of these 5, at least 3 must come from above the red dash line, and only 2 can come from below it. However, this doesn't mean you have to go with a 3-2 setup. You could choose 5 from the top if the situation calls for it. Keep in mind that while the blanked out talents aren't completely useless, they're only viable in very, very, very niche situations. The 11 highlighted talents are the most common situational nodes you'll likely be using. To better understand these additional talents, let's look at examples for 2 dungeons and 1 boss encounter. Grim Batol. For this dungeon, I chose 3 situational talents from the top section and 2 from the bottom. Pressure Points. This is crucial for Grim Batol, as there are many adds that enrage, which can quickly overwhelm your tank. With Pressure Points, Paralysis also functions as a soothe, removing these enrages. This is a very niche talent, but for Grimbatol, it's essential. Tiger Tail Swipe. Grimbatol has numerous adds that cast frequently, so CC is vital. Increasing the range of leg sweep ensures that you hit more targets, and this hopefully means that less casts are going to go out. Vigorous Expulsion and Bounce Back. These two talents provide passive healing and passive damage reduction respectively, which can be helpful when spells do go through due to the constant casting of enemies and missed CC. Lighter Than Air. This talent actually gives you a dash after you roll, which is handy for manoeuvring around the many line of sight mechanics and knockbacks from the Drakes and Grimbatol. It allows faster repositioning or a quick return to combat. Arakara, City of Echoes. In this example, I've also selected 3 situational talents from the top and 2 from the bottom. Detox. City of Echoes has many poison effects, from dots applied by adds at the beginning to periodic poison effects from the final boss. Detox can remove these poisons, which is essential for preventing group-wide damage and taking pressure off the healer. Here, you can see me utilize Detox by removing the poison debuff on my character in a safe position. Tiger Tail Swipe. Just like Grimbatol, this dungeon has numerous large pools with caster adds. Extending the range of leg sweep allows you to CC more targets, enhancing your control and safety of the group. Bounding Agility and Windwalking. The frequent frontals and movement heavy mechanics in this dungeon mean that increased mobility is valuable for both you and your group. Windwalking provides a movement speed for all your allies and yourself. Windwalking provides movement speed for yourself and your allies, and Bounding Agility allows you to reposition more effectively. Bounce Back. This passive damage reduction is a safety net for when spells get through due to missed CC or interrupts. Look, it's gonna happen, so reducing the risk of getting one shot is vital. The Cicron Raid Boss Encounter. For Cicron, I also went with a 3 top and 2 bottom setup, but here I included what I'm gonna call a dead talent. Bounding Agility and Windwalking. These talents are invaluable on Cicron due to the constant dodge mechanic, Rain of Arrows, that requires frequent repositioning. Bounding Agility gives you an extended roll, while Windwalking boosts your raid's movement speed, reducing the risk of avoidable damage for everyone. Vigorous Expulsion and Bounce Back. These passive abilities help mitigate Cicron's raid-wide damage, especially if mechanics get mismanaged, and provide a buffer of self-healing and damage reduction. Jade Walk. This talent is what I refer to as the dead talent, meaning it has little value in this encounter. However, neither do any of the other remaining talents that we can select, like Detox, Disable, or Pressure Points. All of these are dead talents for this encounter. Jade Walk at least offers a slight movement speed boost out of combat, giving a minor advantage for quickly positioning yourself before the pull, but that's as good as it's going to get, and that's what I mean when I say dead talent. The goal of these examples is to demonstrate that each encounter is unique and may require a different set of talents. You need to get into the habit of assessing your talent tree before each dungeon or raid, considering which talents will best support your role in the fight. Customizing your build in this way is key to improving and making the most out of the Windwalker Monk spec. Now that we've covered the Monk talent tree, let's move on to the final section of this chapter, defensives. Windwalker Monks actually have some great defensives. Honestly, we're kind of spoiled for choice compared to a lot of other DPS specs. Plus, most of our major defensives have relatively short cooldowns at 1 minute 30, so when you manage them well, there's usually one ready to pop when you need it. Let's take a look at the roster. We have Touch of Karma, Fortifying Brew, Diffuse Magic, and finally Vivify. Now, I know Vivify technically isn't a defensive, but bear with me. I'll explain why you should be treating it like one. Each of these has its own time to shine, and once you know how to use them, you're gonna feel way harder to kill. Touch of Karma is what I like to refer to as the offensive defensive. It's more than just a shield, it's a DPS boost too. It absorbs damage equal to 50% of your max health and slingshots 70% of that damage back onto the enemy. The trick here is using it before you're about to get smacked for at least half your health, so you get the most out of that redirection damage. Essentially, you want to get hit, but strategically. Here's an example of usage on Cicron, where I know we're taking a huge amount of raid damage, so I use Touch of Karma to protect myself, but also get the most out of the full defensive and offensive value. Additionally, a tip with Touch of Karma is that it actually scales with your max health. So if you're ever pairing it with Fortifying Brew for one reason or another, pop Fortifying Brew first to max out that absorb. More max health equals a beefier Karma shield. Now, let's take a look at Fortifying Brew, our heavyweight defensive. Fortifying Brew is not actually baseline for Windwalkers and comes in the form of a talent. However, it's pretty much a must-pick talent, and arguably our best defensive for steady, consistent damage. For 15 seconds it boosts your health by 20% and cuts down all incoming damage by 20% as well. This is the defensive you want for survival in those relentless encounters with big chunks of damage coming your way. Now, you've also got two options for buffing Fortifying Brew in the talent tree. You can either buff it to a 30% health increase and 30% damage reduction, or you can reduce its cooldown by 30 seconds. As Fortifying Brew initially has a 2-minute cooldown, 9 times out of 10 you want the cooldown reduction so you can pop it more often with the 1-minute 30 cooldown that matches your other defensives. However, there can be situations where the longer cooldown but bigger defensive capabilities do win out. So let's look at an example of Fortifying Brew in action then. I use Fortifying Brew when I know I'm about to face extended damage, like in Mythic Rush None, where I know incoming mechanics will hit hard and fast. Activate it right before the chaos starts and let it carry you through the worst of it is the best approach to using this defensive. Now, Diffuse Magic. Similarly to Fortifying Brew, it is a talent. Technically, it's a choice node talent, with the other option being a passive magic shield alternative, but honestly, it's a no-brainer. It's a 6-second buff that reduces all magic damage by a whole 60%, and it reflects any harmful magic effects back to the caster. Though, just bear in mind that the reflect can be a bit finicky on what it chooses to bounce back. This one's your get out of jail free card for heavy magic damage, and trust me, used right, Diffuse Magic will keep you in the game when your teammates are dropping like flies. So, I have two great examples of Diffuse Magic usage. On this Cicrin encounter, we mismanaged a mechanic and are taking heavy magic damage as a result. I used Diffuse Magic during this, and as you can see the difference in damage taken compared to other players, whilst they're dropping like flies, I'm just vibing. The second example is looking at the spell Reflect. In this Dawnbreaker run, I get targeted by an AoE damage spell. Once it's applied to me, I pop Diffuse Magic and watch as it bounces back to the caster and instead damages the ads. It's satisfying and effective. Okay, now let's look at the most underrated defensive in your toolkit, Vivify, the hidden gem. Look, I know it's technically a heal and not a defensive, but hear me out. With Vivacious Vivification and Protect and Serve, you're getting a 70% boost to its healing, and it's an instant cast every 10 seconds. What does this mean? Well, Vivify becomes a giant heal that you can cast regularly to keep yourself healthy. Basically, it's a Hellstone on steroids. Speaking of Healthstones, I think these are the best thing to compare with Vivify. Healthstones heal you for 25% of your total health, with a 1-minute cooldown that only begins when you leave combat. A baseline instant heal Vivify does heal you for just under what a Hellstone would. However, you can cast it instantly 6 times in the time you can use a single Healthstone, and that's being generous in suggesting its cooldown starts instantly. But what's even crazier is when Vivify crits. When this heal crits, which it does fairly often, it heals more than a Hellstone would. I've seen it heal me for 2 million health, which is 33% of my health bar in an instant cast. If there was one piece of advice to take away from this entire video, it's honestly to not sleep on Vivify and start getting used to using it proactively. I would say it is our best defensive. So, closing up on this chapter on defensives, there's a lot to unpack, but understanding when to use each defensive makes you that much harder to kill, and lets you keep up your DPS while staying alive. Now, let's move on to Season 1. So, Season 1 of The War Within. This chapter is all about breaking down the essentials, what stats to chase, the best gear to snag, and the consumables to run. We'll go step by step in this chapter, so let's kick things off with stat priority. Before we dive into stats, let me put out the golden rule here. always sim your character. Yes, Windwalkers have a general stat priority, but it's not set in stone. What I mean by this is that every piece of gear you equip impacts your overall stat weights, and breakpoints can mean that you can eventually reach situations where a lower priority stat becomes your best option. On paper, our stat priority looks like this. Agility, our main stat, is priority 1. Haste, our best secondary stat, is priority 2. And Mastery, Versatility and Crit are all about equal, sitting at priority 3. Agility is king, so higher item level gear with more agility usually wins, with the exception of rings, necks and trinkets, which lack main stats. To give you an example from my own setup currently, I've got agility at 54,306, haste at 20,276, versatility at 7,716, crit at 5,052, and mastery at 3,786. Notice haste here outshines the combined value of all the other secondary stats combined, because it's just that good. However, that doesn't mean I'm running haste on every single piece of gear. My current helmet doesn't have any haste at all, because it has a much higher agility compared to the helmet I was previously using, and because I'm already extremely weighted towards haste. This balance in stats shifts constantly. Gear up, sim your setup, and check if you need a rebalance. I got a new cloak recently, and after simming all my gear, I had to swap in different boots with a different stat profile to get the most out of it. Bottom line, simming is crucial. Now we've looked at stat priority, it makes sense to go over gear and gearing in Season 1. First off, let's talk about tier set bonuses. Here's the lowdown. The 2 set bonus makes our Tiger Palm give your next melee ability 5% increased damage. And the 4-piece bonus makes all our other melee abilities boost the next Tiger Palm's damage by 25%, and this stacks up to 6 times. Plus, 15% of Tiger Palm's damage splashes to nearby enemies. So, to summarize, it's passive. Don't overthink it in combat, just keep doing what you're doing and enjoy the 4% damage boost you'll have when running the full 4 set. The best slot for the 4-piece bonus are shoulders, chest, hands, and legs. However, if you're missing any of these pieces, but have the head slot, then use the head slot until you get the rest. Simple. This season you can rock 2 crafted pieces with embellishments. Our best combo? A crafted 363 one-hander with the Dark Moon Sigil Ascension embellishment, and another armor piece with the Writhing Armor Banding embellishment. Ideally, the Writhing Armor Banding will be on a crafted cloak, wrists, or belt, as these don't interfere with our tier set. So, why these embellishments? Simply because they're the best DPS boosts for our setup, period. For example, I crafted a one-handed fist weapon with Dark Moon Sigil Ascension, and wrists with the Writhing Armor Banding, since it gave me the best sim at the time. As you progress, you'll likely craft more 363 gear. I recently added a crafted ring to my gear setup, but only once I finished upgrading other key pieces. As with everything, sim different secondary stats on crafted gear to get your optimal setup. And you don't need to rush to craft non-embellishment pieces. I held off on my ring until last week, because other upgrades just simmed better. Now, let's look at trinkets. Blood Mallet is great for a general idea, but for specific encounters, use Warcraft logs to see what top Windwalkers are running for certain raid bosses, and Raid.io for Mythic Plus Insight. Based on these resources, our best trinket combo is the passive trinket, Void Reaper Contract, plus an active trinket, either a Treacherous Transmitter or Skardin's Grace. Now, Skardin's tends to be the go-to in Mythic Plus and is a strong choice in raids, but some bosses might favour Treacherous Transmitter, adjust based on the encounter. Closing out gear, let's talk about the Void Reapers set. This set is a must-have for Windwalkers. Void Reaper's Warp Blade and Void Reaper's Contract share a powerful set bonus. I'm still hunting for the contract myself, and it's the biggest single upgrade I could get right now. Run Warp Blade and your crafted weapon for the whole season with your highest item level weapon in your main hand for maximum output. Finally, just because it's worth mentioning, don't limit yourself to just one gear setup. I keep 3 different gear configurations in my bags because different content calls for different setups. You might have a mix that's optimal for single target and another that's better for AoE. These little tweaks add up, especially if you're already holding the gear. You might as well use it. Finally, to close out the Season 1 section, let's look at enchants, consumables, and gems. Use this chart for the best enchants per slot, but with one caveat: ring enchants. Haste is generally best, but sim your rings to see if a different secondary performs better with your current stats. Looking at consumables, this table is going to be your best resource, and I'll go through it. Starting with flasks, go with Tempered Swiftness for straight haste, or Alchemical Chaos for a big random secondary boost that changes every 30 seconds, with the side effect of losing some of another secondary. The rule of thumb here is if you're still gearing up, use Tempered Swiftness, and if you're in full heroic and mythic gear, use Alchemical Chaos. As always, sim to confirm. Combat potions, go Tempered Potion for that massive agility boost. There are no substitutes here. Healing wise, use the Algari Healing Potion. It's the biggest consumable heal in the game. Also, pair this with a health stone whenever possible, since they don't share a cooldown. Looking at weapon buffs, both weapons should have Algari Mana Oil for bonus haste, our top secondary stat. Augment rune wise, the Crystallized Augment rune is the strongest, but it is pricey. Draconic Augment rune and Dreambound Augment rune are budget options from Dragonflight, but they do give less of an overall buff. Food wise, Feast of the Midnight Masquerade is ideal, as it gives agility, but it is pricey. Beladar's Bounty offers haste at a better cost. Finally, I want to look at gems. You want to be using the Culminating Blasphemi as your Algari gem, giving bonus crit based on your other unique gem colours. Generally, haste gems are your go-to, and I advise starting with the Versatile Emerald if you're still gearing. However, as item levels rise, it's better to run 4 different colours for the Blasphemite buff. These are the gems I'm currently running as an example. So, to wrap up this section, if there's one mantra for stats and gearing and consumables, it's this: sim everything. Simming gives you the answer to your stats, gear, enchants, consumables, and gems for your specific setup. Don't skimp on it, because that's how you unlock the best for your Windwalker Monk. Now, onto the section you've all been waiting for. Let's look at Shado-Pan. In this penultimate section, we're diving into the Shado-Pan hero talent. Right now, it's the stronger of the 2 hero talents, and the one you'll be using in almost every situation. We'll cover how this talent actually works, walk through the Shado-Pan talent tree, and break down how to play it effectively in both single target and AoE situations. So let's kick things off by understanding the basics of this hero talent. The Shado-Pan talent is passive, so you won't be getting any shiny new buttons to press. Instead, it's powered by 2 core passive abilities, Flurry Strikes and Wisdom of the Wall. Let's break down each one. Starting with Flurry Strikes, every time you output roughly 7% of your max health in damage, you generate a Flurry Strike. Don't worry too much about the exact percentage. Just by playing normally, you'll be cranking out Flurry Strikes in no time. However, there is a cap. You can't hold more than 10 Flurry Strikes at once. Once you reach 10 stacks, you'll stop generating new ones until you use them all up. This means that while Flurry Strikes accumulate automatically, you need to actively manage when you release them. So let's talk about unleashing Flurry Strikes. To release your stored Flurry Strikes, you need to spend 240 energy. And that's where Tiger Palm comes into play, your biggest energy spender. You'll want to weave in Tiger Palm consistently during combat to keep your energy from capping out and ensure that Flurry Strikes are unleashed on time. Letting your energy cap during a fight is generally a big no-no. Any unused energy is missed potential to unleash Flurry Strikes. So here's how it works. You use Tiger Palm to burn through 240 energy, and once you hit the 240 threshold, all 10 of your stored Flurry Strikes shoot out and damage nearby enemies. Additionally, note, you do need to be close to your targets for this effect to actually hit them, so positioning is key. Also, bear in mind, if you're running the Inner Peace talent, it'll take 5 Tiger Palms to reach that energy threshold, otherwise it's 4. Now, onto Wisdom of the Wall. Every time you release 10 Flurry Strikes, you gain 1 of 4 buffs for 16 seconds. These buffs can overlap if you happen to trigger Wisdom of the Wall while another buff is active. Here's how they work. There is a buff rotation, so you can only get each buff once in a cycle, so you'll go through all 4 in sequence. 3 of the buffs are passive, meaning you don't need to think about them too much. However, there is one that you do need to focus on, and that's the Shadow Wisdom of the Wall buff. Unlike the others, this buff lasts for 40 seconds and causes your Flurry Strikes to deal extra shadow damage to all enemies within a 6-yard radius when unleashed. In AoE heavy situations, this buff is a game changer. When it's active, you'll want to prioritize using Tiger Palm to to unleash more flurry strikes and maximize that shadow damage. Let's go through a clip to properly visualize what I've just explained, because it is a lot. So first off, I want to note that I've got a flurry strike tracker and a wisdom of the wall buff tracker, which are really useful and will help visualize what's going on. So I start off by building energy. I'm already at 10 flurry strike stacks, so now I want to unleash these stacks as soon as possible to gain a wisdom of the wall buff. So I proc my final Tiger Palm and unleash 10 flurry strikes and I gain the dodge wisdom buff. So we just keep playing normally. You can see how quickly you get to 10 flurry strike stacks by just pressing your abilities. I'm not really following priority right now as I want to demonstrate flurry strikes, which kind of goes to show that gaining charges, it's not really something you need to think about. So now we proc wisdom of the wall again, and this time we get the shadow buff. Notice how this one is a 40-second buff compared to the others, which are only 16. So because we are shadow buffed, Tiger Palm's priority is ascended as we want to discharge as many flurry strikes as possible. We'll also be overlapping wisdom of the wall buffs here due to Shadow's extensive uptime. So we overlap it here with the mastery buff, giving us 2 buffs at once. And with the shadow buff, there are actually situations where you can discharge enough flurry strikes and end up with a triple overlapping wisdom buff, which is pretty damn good. So here you can see that I finish up with the shadow buff, but I actually complete my full cycle of 4 buffs, so I'm instantly able to get the shadow buff again, which is crazy. And if this was in an AoE boss encounter, my damage would be skyrocketing with this RNG. So just from this clip alone, we can see how much damage my flurry strikes actually did. If you focus on the shadow flurry strike buff uptime, you can end up doing a hell of a lot of damage. If we look at the flurry strike breakdown, you can see how much of the damage actually just comes from the shadow proc alone. More than half. And that was just on a single target dummy. Alright, now we've covered the basics of how Shado-Pan works, let's dive into the hero talent tree itself. First things first, you'll be activating every single node in this tree, so the only real decisions come down to the choice nodes. I'm not going to walk through every talent here, as they are all passive talents that you don't really need to think about, but I do advise you look through them to get familiar with what they actually do. However, we will go through the choice nodes, so let's break them down and discuss what you want to be taking. Starting off with the damage choice node, right at the top, here you're deciding between Pride of Pandaria and High Impact. Pride of Pandaria boosts Flurry Strike's crit chance, and High Impact makes Flurry Strike targets explode on death, dealing extra damage to nearby enemies. The winner? Pride of Pandaria, no question. The difference in value is night and day, with Pride of Pandaria giving a significant and reliable boost. This one isn't even a debate, always go for Pride of Pandaria. Next, let's check out the healing choice node, where you're choosing between Protect and Serve and Lead from the front. Protect and Serve gives your Vivify an extra 30% heal across all applications, and Lead from the front gives a 20% healing boost to Chi Burst, Chi Wave, and Expel Harm. My recommendation? Protect and Serve. Vivify is extremely strong, especially with its short cooldown and optional ally heal, and adding a 30% boost makes it even more of a powerhouse. While this technically is a personal preference node, Protect and Serve is hard to beat. Lastly, we've got the defensive choice node, where you're picking between Whirling Steel and Predictive Training. Whirling Steel gives you parry and avoidance when you drop below 50% health, and Predictive Training reduces damage taken when you parry or dodge. So, which to choose? This one is situational and is going to depend on the encounter you're in. Whirling Steel is better suited for encounters where you're taking large chunk damage, and Predictive Training is better for sustained damage encounters. With the hero talents fully explored, we made it. After 34 minutes of setup, we're finally diving into some single target. So, first things first, let's talk Windwalker talent tree for single target builds, and of course, that means starting with the Cookie Cutter talent. This is your single target bread and butter build. It's not a flexible setup, and for good reason. These talents are just too good to pass up in single target scenarios. For Season 1, you'll mostly be using this setup for 2 specific fights, Sikran and Nexus Princess and Narubar Palace. I'm not going to go over every talent in this tree, but I will walk through your final 3 choices. Alright, so you've got 4 talents to choose from for the last 3 slots. Here's a quick breakdown of each option and when they'll be most useful. Inner Peace. This one's color-coded green for a reason. Take it 99% of the time. Inner Peace raises your maximum energy and lowers the cost of Tiger Palm. For Shado-Pan, We already know that managing energy is key. An inner peace helps you keep your energy flowing and avoid capping out. Plus, it gives you more opportunities to use Tiger Palm thanks to the lower cost. Skip this only if the fight is super short and you're never really struggling with energy. Rushing Jade Wind. Though it might scream AoE at first glance, Rushing Jade Wind is actually great for single target. Every 30 seconds when you hit Strike of the Windlord, Rushing Jade Wind procs and applies steady physical damage to nearby targets for 8 seconds. This gives you consistent damage output on single target fights, so don't be fooled by the AoE reputation, it has a strong place in this build. Now we're going to look at the two final talents, the ones that specifically affect Blackout Kick. Hardened Souls boosts your Blackout Kick crits, and Courageous Impulse makes Blackout Kick hit harder when it procs for a free chi cast. Here's the thing, because Knowledge of the Broken, one of our cookie cutter talents, lets Blackout Kick stack up to 8 times, you're actually pressing it a lot less in favour of higher priority abilities. This means that unless you're in a situation where you're pressing Blackout Kick often, Courageous Impulse can go a bit to waste since it's likely to be ignored until Blackout Kick hits that stack of 8. So, out of these 4 talents, your usual best choice for single target will be Inner Peace, Rushing Jade Wind, and Hardened Souls. But, if you're finding yourself in a fight where Blackout Kick becomes more frequent to use, you'll want Inner Peace, Hardened Souls, and Courageous Impulse. So, that's talents looked over. Let's discuss our single target opener. Our single target opener is 11 steps. I've listed them out here, but I think the best way to go over it is to see it in practice and discuss it in real time. So, initially we're going to watch this on a slower speed, and the reason for this is because I want to talk through each of the abilities being used in this opener and why they're being used, and just about the opener in general to be honest. So right off the bat you'll notice that we are fully stacked on energy and have 2 chi stacks. We start with a Tiger Palm to spend some energy, so we're no longer capped, and we follow this up with a Rising Sun Kick and another Tiger Palm. This puts us in a really good place to kick off our big cooldowns. We have a lot of chi to play with, and our energy has a while to regen until it's capped. Right after this we pop Zwan into Storm, Earth and Fire, instantly refreshing Rising Sun Kick, which we are next going to press. By using our abilities in this order, we're now at 5 hit combo stacks, just in time for our big cooldowns. We have good chi, and we aren't energy capped. So now, we're going to go right into a Strike of the Windlord, and follow it up with a Tiger Palm straight into a Fists of Fury. This puts us in a good spot chi-wise, and means we won't energy cap when we channel our fists. As you might notice, Rising Sun Kick is coming off of cooldown and lines up perfectly with the end of Fists, and you follow this up with a Whirling Dragon Punch. When you finish your opener, you'll be left with minimal chi and a full bar of energy. So now, let's see what this looks like in real time. It's going to feel a lot faster, and that's because it is. You're going to be wanting to press all of your abilities instantly on their GCD and then going into your normal rotation. 11 seconds and done. This is a really important opener to get your head around, as it also follows the priority list that I'm going to explain in a moment. You want to use this opener for all single target encounters. Remember that although a lot of bosses in the raid are AoE fights, you will be using the single target opener on almost all of them. Finally, I thought I'd run you through the opener in a raid encounter. Mainly because raid situations are completely different to training dummies. You're going to have lust, consumables, potentially PI, the whole lot really. Things are also going to be a lot less controlled. For instance, we have a pre-pull here. Awesome. You have to think on your feet with your opener, and it gets a little more complex when you add in trinkets and other abilities into the mix. So I start with the standard opener that we talked about, but I also pop my Treacherous Transmitter during these initial abilities, so that I can proc it during my big damage window after using Storm, Earth and Fire. I also make sure to pop my Tempered Potion at the same time I use Storm, Earth and Fire, so I'm as buffed as possible for my big damage window. I also know that this boss does a raid-wide damage at the start of the fight, so I chuck in a touch of Karma for some extra damage whilst I continue my opener. Now, you might notice that I'm very energy capped right now, and that's mainly because of lust. In a raid situation, you're going to be full to the brim with haste, so don't fixate on your energy too much at this point. However, what I do notice is that because my haste is so high, I can't actually get off a Whirling Dragon Punch, because my Fists of Fury is coming back off cooldown. So instead, I instantly pop Tiger Palm into Fists of Fury to allow myself a bit of energy regen whilst it channels, which allows me to finish the opener with the Whirling Dragon Punch I wanted. So, this is what I mean when I say raid encounters are a completely different beast to training dummies. A lot of the time you're playing on instinct and have to make split-second decisions. It's easy enough for someone to say, follow this opener, priority guide, and get a rank 1 log, but honestly, it's really not that cut and dry. At the end of the day, I think encounters require practice, and some thought put into them by the player regarding when you're going to actually use your abilities. Anyway, I thought showing you this and going through it would be useful. And yes, it is LFR. Now, let's have a look at our single target priority. For single target, the Shado-Pan priority revolves around efficient energy and chi usage to maximize damage while weaving Tiger Palm between abilities to keep energy from capping. This is the priority list, and it includes 8 key spells ranked from most to least important. There are some extra abilities that can be added, but we don't run them this season, so I don't think it's necessary to clutter this list. I will note, however, that I have added Spinning Crane Kick with Chi-Ji to the list. You usually don't run it in single target at all, but on the off chance you do, this is where you'd use it. Just like with the opener, let's go through the priority list with some real-time examples. So, I'm starting this clip at 1 minute and 50 seconds into combat on a target dummy because I think this is the best way to demonstrate how the priority list works. We're in the middle of combat, and we aren't in any of our major cooldowns, so you'll see straight off that we're on 1 chi and low energy. So, I'm going to hold off on casting Blackout Kick for a second, because I see that I have Rising Sun Kick up, a higher priority ability, however, I need the chi to use it. So instead, I Tiger Palm, followed by Rising Sun Kick, and then another Tiger Palm, and only then do I use Blackout Kick, as this then allows me to instantly go into another Rising Sun Kick, straight into Whirling Dragon Punch. So, why did I also start the clip here? Well, because I want to show you what you do when your big cooldowns like Zwan and Storm, Earth and Fire come off cooldown mid-fight, as that isn't expressly mentioned in the priority list. So following on, we gain a free Blackout Kick, and I have no other higher priority abilities up, so we use that knowing we won't lose chi for our big spells. And then, we Tiger Palm one more time to bring our chi to 5, ready for our all-in. We Rising Sun Kick, and then go straight into Zwan and Storm, Earth and Fire. This resets our Rising Sun Kick, which we then use again, because it's our highest priority ability available. I follow this up with a Tiger Palm to refresh some chi, and then channel Fists of Fury whilst I wait for Strike of the Windlord to become available. To best describe what you do, it's kind of like your opener, but midway through a fight. So I see I have mid chi and mid energy, so what I do now is Tiger Palm once again to cap on chi, followed by a Rising Sun Kick straight into Strike of the Windlord. Although Strike of the Windlord has a higher priority, it wasn't quite available, so instead of having downtime, because I've stacked myself on chi beforehand, Rising Sun Kick into Strike of the Windlord is the right thing to do, because I've set myself up in advance to be able to do it. Making sure you're not overcapped on energy or chi whilst following the order of priority list and thinking in advance about what your next moves are going to be is the best way to get the most damage out of your Windwalker. So let's take a look at single target priority in a raid encounter. We're late into the Cicron fight, and you can see I have super high energy and low chi. I use a Tiger Palm into Blackout Kick into Tiger Palm to get some chi available for the high priority abilities that I see are coming off of cooldown. I Rising Sun Kick and then luckily get a free chi proc so I can instantly cast Fist of Fury straight after. However, I don't. Although I'm not overcapped on energy right now, I'm midway through my Shadow Wisdom of the War buff, so I want to try and pop Blurry Strikes. Instead, I Tiger Palm, followed by that Fist of Fury, which is good practice as you gain a set amount of energy back whilst channeling fists anyway. I follow this with a Tiger Palm to avoid overcapping energy again, and then Rising Sun Kick as it's the highest priority. Now, notice Touch of Death comes up. I actually don't use it as there's more value in holding it for my bigger cooldowns to amplify their damage. As I keep up using my abilities following the priority list, I get a boss mechanic on me, and during this time I do have some downtime on the boss. However, that doesn't mean I turn my brain off. I'm actively thinking about what I'm going to be doing the moment I can get back on the boss. And that's probably one of my best pieces of advice for learning, is to get into the habit of thinking ahead in an encounter. So, with single target done, it's time to look at AoE. When it comes to AoE, we're treating any fight with over 3 targets as AoE focused. For 2 target encounters, you might need to check popular setups to decide between single target or AoE builds, like Silken Court, where both setups are actually viable. When it comes to the Shado-Pan AoE build, this is what you're going to be running for about 90% of the content this season, especially when it comes to Mythic Plus dungeons. Similar to single target talents, the majority of AoE talents are set in stone, with only a few optional choices. Here's a breakdown of these options, categorized by priority based on situation and encounter needs. You have 5 optional talents to choose from, but can only select 3 in total. The talents are divided by a red line, where you need to pick 2 talents from above the line and 1 talent from below. Let's walk through each talent and when you might choose it. Rushing Jade Wind. This is your go-to in almost every AoE situation, and what you'll be taking 9 times out of 10. It excels in Mythic Plus due to its ability to apply Mark of the Crane stacks passively to all nearby enemies, which means your spinning crane kick will hit harder without requiring you to manually target each enemy. Inner Peace. A strong choice for AoE that increases your energy cap and reduces the energy cost of Tiger Palm. This talent is commonly used in Mythic Plus since it allows for more frequent Tiger Palm casts, which keeps wisdom procs flowing, specifically the Shadow proc. In raid settings, Inner Peace is useful, though it can be swapped depending on the fight, and if you're looking to prioritize burst windows or sustain damage. Drinking Horn Cover. Speaking of burst windows, this talent extends the duration of Storm, Earth and Fire clones with each chi spending ability. This can work well in certain raid encounters with long burst phases, though it is less commonly chosen in Mythic Plus compared to Inner Peace due to less sustained benefit. Communion with Wind. This is the default choice for Mythic Plus and most raid bosses. It reduces the cooldown of Strike of the Windlord, leading to more frequent applications of Rushing Jade Wind, and increases your burst damage. This is your most reliable pick for high damage AoE situations. Finally, Zwan's Bond. For Shado-Pan, this is quite a niche talent, but it does have its place. It's best used in specific raid encounters where you need to invoke Zwan every 1 minute and 30 seconds, rather than every 2. For example, this talent is ideal in fights like Mythic Overnax, where you want Zwan to align with specific mechanics, for example, every other egg set. You might also use it on heroic bosses if you anticipate fights lasting just under 2 minutes, allowing you to maximize Zwan's uptime. So, now that we've had a look at all of the optional talents, let's look at the optimal AoE talent combination. For most encounters, the recommended AoE talent setup will be using Rushing Jade Wind, Inner Peace, and Communion with Wind. This setup provides consistent AoE damage with optimal energy management, whilst also letting you seamlessly weave Tiger Palm into rotation to maintain wisdom procs. So now that we've covered talents for AoE, let's take a look at the AoE opener. This is most likely going to be what you use for Mythic Plus encounters. This is a 9 ability list, however, it can sometimes be reduced to 8 steps, and I'll explain why. The variability in the opener comes from step 2, which focuses on ensuring you start with at least 4 chi before popping your major cooldowns. Unlike raid encounters where you typically start with 2 chi before combat, Mythic Plus often requires transitioning quickly from pull to pull, which means you may need to adjust to maintain or build chi between packs. Think of each Mythic Plus pull as a fresh AoE opener, as having enough chi at the start is essential to executing this opener effectively. Let's go through the opener in action to solidify this sequence. Watching this opener will demonstrate how each ability flows into the next, where quick chi spending and efficient energy management are essential to dealing significant damage across multiple targets. So, notice first off, because I'm demonstrating this opener on target dummies, I start with 2 chi, so this will be the opener with 8 steps, and we don't have to double Tiger Palm to get to our 4 chi target. So, with this opener, we aren't too worried about hit combos just yet, so we go straight into Zwan and Storm, Earth and Fire, into a Strike of the Windlord. The main reason for this is you want to be hitting all targets instantly with your big cooldowns, as well as getting up to 5 marks of the crane stacks for your spinning crane kick. You follow this up with another Tiger Palm to avoid energy capping and bring yourself up to 6 chi stacks. At this point, you'll either be at 4 or 5 hit combo stacks depending on if you double Tiger Palmed, so your next ability in the sequence, Fists of Fury, hits as hard as it possibly can. Once your fist ends, you want to then Rising Sun Kick into Whirling Dragon Punch, as this is your third hardest hitting AoE ability. By following this sequence, we're in a really good spot to begin our priority order, as we have full energy, some chi to spare, and a fully stacked buff Spinning Crane Kick. Now, I think it's worth showing this clip to demonstrate not reaching your 4 chi target with Tiger Palms. We play this sequence out, and all goes well, up until the point of casting Fists of Fury, but you'll notice that we aren't able to cast a Rising Sun Kick, as we're chi starved, meaning no Whirling Dragon Punch in quick succession. Although it seems tedious, and you could argue why not just Tiger Palm and then Rising Sun Kick into Whirling Dragon Punch, this will be a damage loss, as you're not following the optimal opener sequence, and it will throw off all of your high damage ability cooldowns. It seems like a minute thing, but you really do want to be opening with at least 4 chi in AoE. So, now let's take a look at your AoE priority. When playing Shado-Pan in AoE situations, your priority spell list is the key to maximizing damage output. This list organizes 8 abilities in descending priority order, allowing you to focus on which abilities to use and when. There are other situational abilities, but since they're not typically part of the build this season, we'll keep things straightforward. A notable mention goes to Spinning Crane Kick with Dance of the Chi-Ji. It's powerful even with a single stack, and should be used alongside your second priority slot. This lets you flexibly capitalize on Dance of the Chi-Ji procs without interrupting your rotation. So, you might have noticed that there wasn't a real-time example of how to do the AoE opener, and that's because I'm going to combine the opener with the priority list in one clip, because this is a pretty decent pull that demonstrates an opener and priority, but it also demonstrates mistakes that can be made in the heat of the moment. I also like this clip because it shows things that actually happen in a dungeon environment that you won't have to think about or deal with when practicing on target dummies. So you'll see straight off the bat, I Tiger Palm twice here, even though I reached the 4 chi goal, with a single Tiger Palm. Now, I don't have to do this, and I probably shouldn't have. But, as we've just started the dungeon, it won't affect hit combos, but it will overcap me on chi. So, I pop my Transmitter Trinket so that I can get the buff lined up with Storm, Earth and Fire. I do activate it a little early, so I miss out on a couple seconds of uptime. So now I do the opener sequence as demonstrated in the opener clip. You can see that I line myself up here with the adds to hit them all with Strike of the Windlord. So now what you would normally do here is Tiger Palm, but because I double Tiger Palmed earlier, I'm not energy capped, so instead I Fist of Fury. Now, just like in the clip showing what happens if you don't follow the opener order, I don't have enough chi to Rising Sun Kick right away, so I Tiger Palm into Rising Sun Kick into Whirling Dragon Punch. So overall, this will have been a DPS loss, and it all stems back to my mistake really of double Tiger Palming at the start of combat when I didn't need to. So now we've completed our opener in about 9 seconds, we go straight into our AoE priority. So because I wasn't quite energy capped, I go for a buff Spinning Crane Kick into Tiger Palm to start energy regen ticking again. So looking at all available abilities, although Blackout Kick is shining and looks like the button to press, its priority is lower than a baseline Spinning Crane Kick, so I use that instead. Now, my major abilities are coming off of cooldown, I Tiger Palm into a Spinning Crane Kick. This is a mistake. Although you might think Spinning Crane Kick is better here, it's actually not, as a baseline Crane Kick hits like a wet noodle. The right play here was to Rising Sun Kick. I follow this up with a leg sweep, as the adds are no longer hard CC'd and my AoE CC is available, and then quickly into a Rising Sun Kick as I get hit with a magic debuff, which I actually reflect with Diffuse Magic, and I also use Touch of Karma to avoid any other damage coming my way. So I followed this up with a Tiger Palm as well, but at this moment I'm also heavily focused on what sort of interrupts and CC are going to be needed on these adds to avoid our group taking big damage. I think it's important to be aware that you aren't just focusing on your priority list in encounters, but actively need to be thinking about how you can help your group. So, as I channel Fists, I see that almost every ad is casting, and I'm the only player left with hard CC. so I drop a ring of peace to interrupt these casts and then continue using my hard-hitting abilities on the adds. Now really, I should be weaving in Tiger Palms, especially as my Shadow Wisdom buff is procced, but I'm more focused right now on making sure casts don't go through, and this is what I mean by encounters being completely different to target dummy practice. I think the reason I'm showing you this clip with quite a few mistakes is that it's okay to not always play perfectly. You've got about 50 things running through your mind in an encounter that you need to keep track of, and it's not always going to work out how it does on a target dummy. What matters is learning from the mistakes and actually understanding what you could have done right. And with that, we've reached the end of the Shado-Pan section. With only one more section to go, let's get straight into the Conduit of the Celestials hero talent. Unlike Shado-Pan, Conduit of the Celestials currently ranks as the weaker of the two hero talent options, making it less common in most builds. However, there are still scenarios where it can shine, and understanding its mechanics will give you the flexibility to make the best choice for your playstyle and the encounter you're facing. In this section, we'll break down the fundamentals of this hero talent and the unique mechanics that define it. We'll also review the Conduit of the Celestials talent tree, highlighting critical choice nodes and talent interactions. Following this, we'll walk through single target, looking at the talents, opener and priority list, demonstrating how Conduit of the Celestials performs in damage scenarios. And finally, we'll go through the AoE talents, opener and priority list, showing where Conduit of the Celestials fits into AoE raid and Mythic Plus content. Let's kick things off by understanding exactly how Conduit of the Celestials works and what sets it apart. With Conduit of the Celestials as an active hero talent, the centerpiece here is Celestial Conduit, an ability you can channel every 90 seconds, radiating both damage and healing to enemies and allies around you. The strength of this talent lies in its flexibility, but due to its split damage mechanic, it typically underperforms in AoE situations compared to Shado-Pan. Because of the intricate mechanics of Conduit of the Celestials, it makes sense to spend a lot more time on the hero talent tree to fully understand how this hero talent functions. The Conduit of the Celestials talent tree brings in 4 crucial choice nodes that significantly shape your playstyle. We'll look at them individually and discuss which one you're going to want to be taking. Temple Training versus Xuan's Guidance. Temple Training boosts Fists of Fury and Spinning Crane Kick, while Xuan's Guidance enhances Tiger Palm and Blackout Kick. For consistent AoE and burst damage, Temple Training is the clear choice in all situations. Restore Balance and Yulon's Knowledge. Restore Balance grants Rushing Jade Wind when you summon Xuan, while Yulon's Knowledge extends the duration of Rushing Jade Wind. You'll want to choose Restore Balance to keep those AoE stacks up consistently, especially since this talent setup has you summoning Xuan often. Inner Compass vs August Dynasty. Inner Compass grants extra secondary stats, while August Dynasty buffs Rising Sun Kick after you Jadefire Stomp. As we're not currently running Jadefire Stomp, Inner Compass is the go-to for the steady secondary stat boosts. Ni Xiao's Protection and Jade Sanctuary. Ni Xiao's Protection provides Fortifying Brew and Absorb Shield, while Jade Sanctuary heals and reduces incoming damage during and after Celestial Conduit. This node is actually more situational and can vary by encounter, but generally speaking, go with Ni Xiao's Protection for mitigation in challenging encounters. Now, let's look at the hero talent Celestial buffs and playstyle implications. With Conduit of the Celestials, you have 4 Celestial buffs to keep in mind. Courageous White Tiger. This adds a high damage proc to Tiger Palm, which is guaranteed after summoning Xuan, and gives you solid burst potential. Heart of the Jade Serpent. After you spend 45 Chi, this buff slashes the cooldown of Strike of the Windlord, Fists of Fury, Rising Sun Kick, and Whirling Dragon Punch by 75% for 8 seconds after you cast Strike of the Windlord. This massively increases your rotation speed and adds a high-paced rhythm to your gameplay. Strength of the Black Ox. This deals AoE damage and buffs Blackout Kick after using Xuan, enhancing your sustained AoE damage. Flight of the Red Crane. This causes Spinning Crane Kick and Rushing Jade Wind to sometimes increase energy regeneration, helping keep up with high energy demand. Now we're going to talk about the final node, and this is the big one, Unity Within. By casting Celestial Conduit, you automatically activate each Celestial buff at double effectiveness, providing you with an incredible spike in damage and activity. This transforms your rotation into an action-heavy sequence, similar to the high APM of an Outlaw rogue. However, I want to note that Unity Within can occasionally bug out and fail to activate automatically. To avoid this, you want to recast Celestial Conduit during its channel to activate Unity Within on the off chance it doesn't automatically trigger, as missing this will lead to a huge loss in damage and buffs. Conduit of the Celestials has a lot going on compared to Shado-Pan, with its variety of buffs and emphasis on high frequency casting after channeling. This setup provides a unique tempo and rotation complexity, allowing skilled players to make the most of its powerful benefits, especially in shorter encounters. So, now we've discussed the hero talents itself, let's get into some single target. Starting with the Windwalker talent tree, we can see the cookie cutter talent setup for Conduit of the Celestials aligns closely with the Shado-Pan build, but there are a few key differences. Specifically, I've taken Transfer of Power out of the cookie cutter talents, and I'll go over why in a moment. These cookie cutter talents are the foundation of the single target build. Similar to Shado-Pan, these are the strongest options with limited flexibility, as they're optimized for peak single target performance. However, with Conduit of the Celestials, you do get the added room of 4 optional talents. With this setup, you can choose 3 talents from above the red line and 1 from below. Let's go through them. Starting with Zwan's Bond. This talent aligns Zwan's cooldown with Celestial Conduit on a 90-second timer, amplifying your damage. Zwan's Bond is a high priority choice for Conduit of Celestials, allowing you to activate it often and capitalizing on its synergy with the hero talent. The design of the talent system limits the ability to use Transfer of Power alongside Zwan's Bond, but Zwan's Bond consistently outperforms in synergy. This makes it practically a non-negotiable pick. Inner Peace. With its boost to maximum energy and reduced Tiger Palm cost, Inner Peace helps avoid energy capping, which is critical for maintaining a smooth rotation. It ensures you can maximize uptime on priority abilities and reduces downtime caused by energy shortages. Inner Peace is almost always useful, though you could skip it in shorter fights with fewer energy constraints. Rushing Jade Wind. While it's often viewed as an AoE talent, Rushing Jade Wind has excellent single target benefits, especially with Strike of the Windlord cast every 30 seconds. This talent activates frequently and deals consistent damage, while also synergizing with Celestial hero talents to increase your energy regeneration. As a result, Rushing Jade Wind becomes a strong single target choice, providing damage and helps sustain energy levels. Hardened Souls and Courageous Impulse. These 2 talents affect Blackout Kick. Hardened Souls enhances crit damage, and Courageous Impulse buffs damage on Blackout Kick when it procs with a no chi cost. In most single target situations, Blackout Kick is lower on your priority list, mainly reserved for when it reaches 8 stacks due to knowledge of the broken. However, both talents work well with the Celestial hero abilities, so if you're using Blackout Kick more frequently, these talents can be situationally strong. Typically, the go-to talent combination includes Zwan's Bond, Inner Peace, Rushing Jade Wind, and Hardened Souls. However, if you're frequently using Blackout Kick and don't encounter many energy issues, you take Zwan's Bond, Rushing Jade Wind, Hardened Souls, and Courageous Impulse. So, that's talents looked at, let's discuss our single target opener. So, our single target opener is 12 steps. I've listed them out here, and you may notice that they're extremely similar to Shado-Pan. Everything up until step 9 is in the exact same order. I think the best way to go over this is to see it in practice and discuss it in real time. So, this opener is quite similar to Shado-Pan, however it does variate with the addition of Celestial Conduit at step 9, but it is put there for a specific reason and hasn't been jammed in randomly. So we open with the standard Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm, and that's predominantly to get the ball rolling with energy regen and building some hit combo stacks. We then pop Zwan, Storm Earth and Fire into Rising Sun Kick. The reason this doesn't differentiate from the Shado-Pan opener at this point is because we want to be getting our big cooldowns out early and also build up 5 hit combos before we use Conduit. So now we strike with the Windlord and then pop another Tiger Palm, so we avoid energy capping whilst we channel Celestial Conduit. So now we're on step 9 and we use the ability Celestial Conduit and fully channel it. I make sure to press Celestial Conduit again before the channel finishes to activate Unity Within and avoid the bug we talked about earlier. We then cast Rising Sun Kick and Fists of Fury to get some big damage out, and you can see how much faster this fist channels because of Unity Within activating. It's kind of crazy. Finally, we hit a Whirling Dragon Punch and our opener is finished. we're in a decent position of full energy and mid-chi to get into our priority. So let's just watch this again in real time to see how fast you're going to have to be doing this. It is a 12-step opener and we're already halfway through it. You want to be pressing each ability the moment it comes off of GCD. And we finished our entire opener in 13 seconds, which is slightly longer than Shado-Pan, but that's mainly because you've got more channels and more steps to do. So let's go through this opener in an actual boss encounter. I've chosen Mythic Ovenax because it's the only real footage I've got of using Conduit, as it's that far behind Shado-Pan. So I open by popping my Treacherous Transmitter trinket, and I get the jumping task, so this is perfect. I can set it off the moment I activate Storm, Earth and Fire. Other than that, I'm just using the standard Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm, and then follow this up with Zwan and Storm, Earth and Fire as I activate my Transmitter to get the full buff. I also use my Tempered Potion as I cast Storm, Earth and Fire, and then I use Strike of the Windlord for some big damage. I use one final Tiger Palm to avoid energy capping, and I begin my Celestial Conduit channel right next to the boss. You'll see my damage skyrocket on the meters when I use this ability, because it is pretty decent burst. And then just before the channel ends, I press Celestial Conduit again to activate Unity Within. To finish off this opener, I Rising Sun Kick into a Fists of Fury, but then I do have to cast one more Rising Sun Kick because it came off cooldown extremely fast. And then I have to use another Fists of Fury because that also came off of cooldown really fast. And then one more Rising Sun Kick because these abilities just keep coming off of cooldown. And I finished the opener with a Whirling Dragon Punch. So, what is our single target priority then when playing Conduit of the Celestials? Well, this is it. It's a list of 9 spells that you prioritize from top to bottom. This list is exactly the same as Shado-Pan, with the only added addition of Celestial Conduit on the list. There are some extra abilities that can be added to this list, but we don't run them this season, so I don't think it's necessary to clutter the list too much. I will note, however, that I have added Spinning Crane Kick with Chi-Ji to this list. You usually don't run it in single target at all, but on that off chance you do, this is where you'd use it. So let's have a look at some single target priority in action then. So I've started this clip about 1 minute 30 into a fight, because this is when you're going to get your Zwan and Celestial Conduit back up, and I want to kind of show you how to use this during combat amongst your priority list. So we're starting with low chi and energy, but we see Fists of Fury is coming up, so we use that. Whilst this channels, we think about our next move. So Zwan and Celestial Conduit are about to come up, and Whirling Dragon Punch is up, and Tiger Palm too. So we Tiger Palm first, and then use Whirling Dragon Punch into a Rising Sun Kick to semi-replicate the opener and get the double Rising Sun Kick off of Storm, Earth and Fire. So we use Zon, and then we use Storm, Earth and Fire, reset the Rising Sun Kick, and use it. We follow this up with a Celestial Conduit. We're low energy and low chi, but this is fine, its energy will regen whilst we channel. Now you're going to notice our haste is kind of cracked right now as we channel this ability, so we're going to struggle to keep up with energy regen, but that's fine, it's just part of playing this hero talent. So we finish Conduit and cast Tiger Palm to avoid energy capping, and then go straight into another Rising Sun Kick as it's the highest priority available. We then strike with the Windlord as it just comes up. We Tiger Palm once again to try avoid energy capping, and now we have tons of chi to play with and lots of cooldowns. So we use Rising Sun Kick again, and Fists of Fury. Notice we've had a procced Blackout Kick available for a while now, but I refuse to press it, as it isn't the highest priority, no matter how shiny that button looks. So yeah, I think this is a good demonstration of Conduit priority, and using Celestial Conduit and Zwan midway through combat. So, with single target explored, it's time to have a look at AoE for Conduit of the Celestials. Just like with Shado-Pan, we're treating encounters with 3 targets or more as AoE. Let's start off with our cookie cutter talents. This is the lot, and you may notice we only have 1 talent left that we can select. I'm going to be quite strict here with Conduit AoE, and that it's pretty set in stone what you're going to run. With that said, let's look at the optional talents. Straight off the bat, there's only 2 of them. And out of those 2, you can only select 1. This is simply because cookie cutter talents for AoE are that important, that you're kind of shoehorned into a very finite choice here. Let's look at the options and when you would go one or the other. So, starting with Inner Peace, it increases your maximum energy cap and reduces the cost of Tiger Palm. This means you're less likely to be capped on energy, which is a good thing, as it means you'll be less likely to run into situations where you're struggling to use abilities due to a lack of energy or chi. I would advise going with Inner Peace on Mythic Plus, as you're going to get more value from having more energy to play around with across a whole dungeon than the increased damage you get from Storm, Earth and Fire windows with the other talent. Drinking Horn Cover is the other talent, and this one increases your Storm, Earth and Fire duration every time you spend Chi whilst it's up. This is going to be better for boss encounters where you're not really going to be having energy issues, and you get a lot more value from Storm, Earth and Fire uptime, because compared to a dungeon run, a boss is significantly shorter. So I'd advise taking this talent for raid. With talents covered, let's take a look at your AoE opener and your AoE priority. But first, I'm going to say this now. For this section, I'm not going to show you a real-time dungeon playthrough for the sole reason that I just cannot recommend you run this hero talent in its current iteration. It's weaker than Shado-Pan in all AoE encounters, and honestly, it's weaker than Shado-Pan in single target as well, which honestly sucks, because I think this hero talent has tons of potential. Anyway, single target opener time. Believe it or not, your Conduit opener in AoE is the exact same as it is in single target, which may seem strange, but because of the ability ordering and priority of casts, it just works out exactly the same. Let's run this through in a controlled environment. So, we begin this AoE opener in a 3 ability order that I'm sure you're extremely familiar with by now. Tiger Palm, Rising Sun Kick, Tiger Palm. This gets the ball rolling with energy regen and building up some hit combo stacks. We then pop Zwan, Storm, Earth and Fire into a Rising Sun Kick. Before we use Strike of the Windlord in AoE, we want to make sure we're lined up with all of our targets to get the most out of this cast, and then we use another Tiger Palm to avoid energy capping. We then pop Celestial Conduit and need to make sure we're hitting all targets as we fully channel it. We then cast Fist of Fury and then Rising Sun Kick to get some big damage out, and finally we hit a Whirling Dragon Punch and we're in a decent position of full energy and about mid-chi to get into our priority. All in all, this took 12 seconds, which is about the same time it took for our single target opener because, well, they're exactly the same. Finally, let's look at the AoE priority. This priority list may look familiar, and that's because it is. It's the exact same as the Shado-Pan one, with the addition of Celestial Conduit as your 4th highest priority. When it comes down to priority list for Windwalker, the only real difference between hero talents is the addition of Celestial Conduit. Let's run through it. So I'm starting this clip off at about 55 seconds into combat. We're pretty low chi and relatively high energy. As we channel Fists of Fury, we're going to think about what our next move is going to be. We have Strike of the Windlord up and Rising Sun Kick up as well, but we're also about to be capped on energy. So straight off the bat, we Tiger Palm, as this is our highest priority ability, and then we Strike of the Windlord. This happens to proc Dance of the Chi-Ji for Spinning Crane Kick, which is a higher priority than Rising Sun Kick. So instead of following up with a Rising Sun Kick, we use Spinning Crane Kick instead. Here we're having to think on our feet and act as abilities come up. I do neglect Tiger Palm here in favour of my higher damage abilities, and that can be regarded as a bit of a mistake. Anyway, so now we can see that Fists of Fury is off cooldown, but we don't quite have the energy for it. So instead of Rising Sun Kick, we Tiger Palm to get the energy and cast Fists of Fury, as it's our highest priority ability off of cooldown. Just because I don't have the energy for it, doesn't mean it's not my highest priority ability. I need to get the energy for it and use it. I think that's a good demonstration of Conduit AoE priority midway through combat. So, with AoE priority finished, we've reached the end of the video. If you've watched all the way through, firstly, I want to say thank you. I put a lot of effort into this, and I appreciate you sticking through it. Secondly, I do hope you managed to learn something from the video, as at the end of the day, that's what the goal of this whole thing is. So, where do we go from here? This is an extremely long video, and that's predominantly because I wanted to fill it to the brim with Windwalker knowledge that will help you for the whole expansion. Guides that follow from this will still be chock-a-block with information, but I'll try to make them more palatable bite-sized videos. Once again, thank you for watching, and let me know in the comments if you managed to learn something you never knew about Windwalker before, or if you have a question, feel free to ask. I'll catch you in the next one.